talking about your why and also different ways of thinking about money. Thinking about money differently can really help you get to different levels, and also it helps you observe phenomena around money, how you build wealth, how you save, things like that. Just thinking about it in different terms can be extremely helpful. So, the first thing is why. I think everybody would like to be wealthy or financially free someday, but the reasons really, really matter. All the people who just want to be wealthy and just have a lot of money, that's really not a good reason. And in fact, it's usually not a good enough reason to get them motivated to do the things they need to do. Um, so I would encourage you to kind of just contemplate, maybe even just write down a couple whys you would like to reach financial stability, or why you would like to reach the level of desired wealth in retirement that you would like to. Without a why, you will get discouraged or you'll spend your money that you make early. It's seen a lot in if you look at different classes and how they spend money, a lot of times there's not a hope for lower classes to leave that class and move into middle class or upper class. And so what happens is they just blow their money, or they spend it irrationally, or they don't save because they don't even really have a why. They don't have a hope to grow it. So having your why is really, really important. Your why should also be more than just wanting to have nice things. Again, that is usually a really weak why. So some of the whys that can be really profound is wanting to leave a legacy for your family. Um, I think having some level of freedom tied to it for retirement can be a really big piece. Maybe you want to take care of your family. Maybe you want to leave a legacy as far as starting a business or an organization or something that impacts your community or your country. There's things like that that have bigger impact and will motivate you through the harder times of saving, investing, doing the hard steps with your money to get to the place that you want to be. I want to encourage you guys, whatever your financial status is, whatever your work is, you can uh, grow your wealth and you can reach a great retirement no matter what you're making. It's always been about what you do with what you have and having self-control. And I would say also like proper financial education, the right tools in the right place. So the story I want to share with you is about a man named Ronald Reed. Now this story made international news when it happened because it was so incredible. This man passed away and left a fortune of $8 million. I don't think I have to tell you, $8 million is a lot of money for anybody. $8 million is a lot of money. You could be a Saudi prince, and $8 million is a lot, right? However, what was most fascinating about this is this guy never had a high paying job in his life. Um, right after he graduated high school, he worked in the military for a very short stint, but then he worked as a janitor for most of his life. Now, I don't want to demean any kind of work. I think all work is good work, and I respect people that work hard at whatever they're doing. But generally, janitors don't make a lot of money. It's very simple work, and it just doesn't pay very well. This man, though, saved and invested his whole life. He lived very frugally. Frugally just means conservatively. He didn't spend a lot of his money, he didn't buy a lot of new things. And he had a plan of how he was saving his money and investing his money. He followed a budget. And by the end of his life, he had $8 million, and he got to give a ton of that to charities that he really cared about. Now, you might not be able to reach quite that same level because he was investing in things that aren't available here necessarily. But the concepts are still applicable, and they're still what can help you reach financial freedom here and retire well here. It might not be $8 million, but you can do amazing things here. And I think there are far more opportunities than most Tunisians think. So I will talk a lot in this course in terms of financial freedom. Part of that is that's the name of the course, what I named it. But I think ultimately what people really want is financial freedom. Having nice things, being able to buy new things is okay. That's just one small part of it, and it's very fleeting. If you just want nice things, you'll never be satisfied. But freedom, because of finances, can be a much bigger pursuit and a much better goal. proper money management can help give you freedom, and not necessarily at the end of your life. It can help give you freedom right now using some of these tools. So that's some of the ways in terms I think of financial freedom. It doesn't have to be retirement. It could be how you use your money right now, and it can free you up to do the things you really want to do, or help you think in terms of using your time and your money differently. So in this section, we're going to talk about thinking about money differently, and this exercise helped me a ton. It helped me rethink what's important and how I spend my time and how I spend my money. So if you have a little piece of paper, I'd encourage you to write some of these things down, do this exercise, maybe even put the video on pause. It's not long, but I want you to think through how much you pay in rent. If you don't have a rent, that's great. Don't write it down. But if you have a rent, or maybe you have a mortgage, write down how much you pay every month in DNR for that mortgage or that rent. Then write down how much you spend in groceries, right, in a month. Maybe you go once a week, try to total that up and write down how much you spend in groceries. Then if you have a car or a car payment, I want you to write down how much you spend on your car. Maybe even separate them out, gas and your car payment if you have a car payment. Lastly, I would write down how much you spend in a month on entertainment. That'd be eating out with friends, going to coffee shops, going to the movies, all that kind of stuff, going to Dahda. If you have a budget for that, or you know about how much you spend per week, try to total that up for your average month. Now, I want you to think through what you're making as far as a net salary. Um, Everybody will have a different number on this probably, but think through how much money you make in a given month from Qore. Maybe you have a side project as well. Total up all of that. And then I want you to find how much you make per hour. All right. So think about it this way. There's 52 weeks in a year. So what you want to do is take your total salary, divide it. If it's already a monthly salary, you can just you can multiply it by 12, and then you can divide it by 52. That's 52 weeks, and then divide it by 40. Um, that would be the easiest. If you know your annual salary, just take your annual salary, divide it by 52, it's 52 weeks, and then divide it by 40, 40 hours you're working. Now, this is an assumption. Maybe not all of you are working 40 hours. Maybe you have extra work, whatever. Just adjust the amount of hours per week that you're working. That's all you would have to do. So instead of 40, if you're working 10 hours a week doing something else, do 50 hours. If you're only working 20 hours with us for Qore, maybe adjust that to 20 instead of 40. At the end of the day, what you get is your per hour rate. Now, of course, there are a lot of things that are not calculated into this. Your salary also includes benefits, it pays your taxes, your retirement, all those kinds of things. So don't get too discouraged by this number. I think everybody sees this number and gets discouraged. But what this is supposed to do is help you see how much you're netting, how much you're bringing in on a per hour basis. And it helps you see, at least right now, not your actual value, but right now what you're getting paid, how much your time can be worth, right? This is really important, because what you can now do is take that number and you can look at how much you have to work to pay for things. And this is what really changed my mind. When I was working in the States, I was realizing, man, if I go out to dinner with my wife, I have to work a couple hours, 3, 4 hours to pay for that meal. That's a lot of work just to pay for one meal out, right? If I wanted a new phone, you can calculate how many hours you have to work to afford to be able to buy this new phone. You think of it in terms of your work. Now, again, I want to re-emphasize, this doesn't mean you're not worth more. It doesn't mean you're going to be stuck in this forever. But at least currently, in your current situation, this is how much time it requires you to own or purchase whatever that good or service is. Now, the way this helped me is it helped me evaluate the value of things based on my current position. So when I was considering a car, right? If you're thinking about buying a car, you can consider Right now, this is going to cost me, however many tens of thousands of hours of work. Is that worth it? Or is there something else that gets the job done that costs me a lot less work but does the same job, right? Um, when you go out and spend, with your friends or you do things for entertainment, you can now evaluate, hey, I had to work 3 hours to do this. Is that worth it? Maybe not, right? You can also kind of look at in your budget, your housing, kind of like what we looked at before, your housing, your debts, your car payment. You can see visually how much you have to work to be able to pay for those things. Now, I know a lot of you are also getting money maybe from your parents, maybe from a spouse as well. And so this might not be your whole picture. And I think everybody, as they continue in their careers, makes more and more. So if you're, an intern or you just graduated and you're not making that much now, don't worry about it. It's normal. Um, but this is a very helpful tool to be able to see uh, your money and your time in a different way and kind of see that old saying, time is money. You can see your time as money and see the value of things differently. And this also works in reverse. Now, this is really cool, and I'll give you a really simple example I think we'll all understand. So, it is not worth my time, like payment wise, time value wise, to go and pick up my lunch and then bring it back to the office, right? If I want to eat at the office and it's convenient here, and I want to order, let's say, from Chili's or KFC, I could drive, spend my gas, get there, pick it up, bring it back, and waste maybe 30 minutes, right? However, I have a time value, and I know it's more worth it for me to keep working and pay somebody 2 dinar or 4 dinar to pick up the food and bring it to me. And I will gladly pay them the 2 or 4 dinar to do that work so that I could do something else with those 30 minutes. And this applies in a lot of different circumstances, especially as you start getting older and you don't need to earn as much anymore because maybe your investments are generating income or you already have a lot saved away. You then are freed up to pay for things to gain time. And this is kind of the opposite, the flip side of that as well, is valuing your time as well. So I didn't really introduce this concept, but we're talking about the three musts. The first one was you must have a why. The second is you must think differently about money. And we already touched on one piece of that. I'm going to touch on another part of thinking differently about money. And this one is going to be hard culturally. But even in America, we have this difficult thing with money and culture, and we call it keeping up with the Joneses. And what this is you always want to appear level or above your peers, your neighbors, things like that. And so what happens though is it becomes this game where everybody's fighting to have nicer things or newer things or something better or keeping up with the people that have nice new things. And this is a dangerous, dangerous trap, especially if you really want to focus on financial stability, if you want to have financial freedom later in life. You cannot do that. Just frankly, especially when you're young, that's the time to build, and it really starts early. And so when you keep up with the Joneses, there will always be people who have more than you, that have nicer things than you, that have newer things than you. If you try to keep up with everybody else, you will never have money left. And the goal is to save money, to be able to invest money. Now, let's take a quick look at what some of the wealthiest people in the world do with their money and how they spend their money. This is fascinating. So, there's a man named Warren Buffett. Many of you might have heard of him. He's one of the most wealthy investors in the world. He's old, and the way he invested made him wealthy later and later in life. But early on, he was not wealthy. It was his strategy and his long term goals that got him to where he is. Uh, so, Warren Buffett bought a modest house back in 1958. He's an old dude. So, he was in his, I think, late 20s, early 30s when he bought a house. 1958. Guess what? He never moved out of that house. He never bought a mansion. He never bought a place on the beach. He could afford it. This guy has 158 million, or sorry, 158 billion dollars. He could buy he could buy countries if he wanted to. But he has not left his modest house that he bought in 1958. He still has it. He bought on an average used Cadillac in 2014. It was kind of a middle of the road car, not super fancy, but it wasn't like a junky car either. And guess what? 2023, he's still driving his 2014 Cadillac. He has not purchased a new car. He doesn't have tons and tons of really nice cars. He still drives his 2014 Cadillac, right? He dresses in suits that you could buy at the average retailer, right? He goes to the equivalent would be like Kiabi or something, and he buys those suits and wears those suits. He can have the finest custom tailored suits in the world if he wanted to. He can have more closets than you could walk through of custom suits, but he doesn't do that. As far as food, when he eats out, if he's choosing, he goes to McDonald's and eats a really simple meal. And he's been doing this most of his life. It's kind of surprising that he's still alive because he eats a lot of McDonald's. But the point is, this is one of the wealthiest investors in history that we know of as far as an investor. And he lives a very modest lifestyle. And what's ironic is you'll find most wealthy people actually live pretty conservatively. The way they got to being wealthy was by saving and a plan, and they're comfortable at a modest lifestyle, and that helps them. So according to WealthX, about 71.9% of all millionaires are self-made. This is fascinating. 20.3% of them benefited from a combination of inheritance and self-created wealth. Only 7.7% became wealthy solely through inheritance. So there's a myth out there that people just, it's generational wealth or they just got lucky. That's not the truth. The truth is, and this is a global survey, it's not just the US, close to 72% of all people at the millionaire status or above earned all of their money on their own and built their wealth. So the stats say it's doable for you, for me, for anybody. You build wealth, you don't inherit it. There are some people that do, and there's a fraction of people who also have a combination of some inheritance and some self-created wealth. But the majority of people had strategies in place and built their wealth. And that gives hope to people like you and me. So finally, the last must is drive. You need to have the drive to have financial freedom, the drive to build wealth, the drive to save, the drive to leave a legacy for your family. If you don't have that, it will be very hard to continue this. This is a long-term game. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And there will be times in life where it gets really hard. There's times in my life where, man, I didn't have a lot of money to pay the bills, or I really thought it would be better to put money into this rather than saving or investing, or times where we actually had to draw from our savings or investments to do different things. When I started Qore, I had to pull from some of my investments to start Qore with savings and investing, just because I saw more value in Qore. There might be a lot of different circumstances in your life, though, sometimes hard times, where it can set you, pull you back. It can kind of redirect your path. It can distract you. And you have to really have this drive, this hunger to reach financial stability, to then reach financial freedom, and to leave a legacy for your family and reach those whys that you've set in place. So having that drive is the last must. You must